Welcome to our third video on how to build an Instagram clone. And I just want to say before we get into this video, if you enjoy this content, do like this video and subscribe to the channel as I will be building a lot more MVPs in the future. So just to recap on our progress in the last video, we got to the stage where we can follow users and have them follow us back, and we can create posts and like them. And we also have a profile where we can see the posts that we have made. But the first stage we want to look at in this video is adding comments to posts. So we want to add a field at the bottom of each post where users can enter some text, submit it, and then we will show the post. So in Instagram we can see this field here at the bottom, and then they have this text above where the comments will show. So let's jump into that first and make a start on creating our comments section. So the first thing we are going to do is create our comments table, and we will use a migration to do that. So our comment will reference the post that it is connected to, and we'll also add some timestamps to see when the comment was made, and then we will have a string field for the text itself. And then finally we want to reference the account of the user that's leaving the comment to. So let's go ahead and run the migration. And let's go and set up our model. So we can do that manually, or we can use the Rails generate command. And we have this message about the migration, so we'll just skip that. And now within our model, we will set up the relationship to say that this comment should be belonging to the post. And we'll add some basic validation here of the fields that we have just added to the table. Within our post model, then we can say that the post has many comments, and we can go ahead and remove this total likes method for now. And we will copy the code from the posts controller and quickly set up a new controller for comments. So let's paste this in and just quickly change the values. So one thing to bear in mind here is that we will not need a new view or a show view for the comment itself, as this will be shown once we are looking at the post. So the only thing we need in here is the ability to create comments, and possibly you could add the ability to delete them also, but for now we will just have this create method, and we'll just go ahead and update the values in here to redirect us back to the dashboard after a comment is created. And depending on where you're leaving the comment from, potentially we could also redirect back to the post itself, but we may come back and do that later. For now we just want to get this working. So now we can add the routes for our comments. Now we could add just the create method, or potentially you could add the destroy method here too, but for now we will just go with the create method on the comments. So that's only that path that will be set up for us. So back in our feed of posts, let's go ahead and add the form which will be used for creating a new comment. So in this form we are going to need a submit button. We are also going to need to embed the post ID, and then we will need a field, a text field, to allow the user to enter a comment. So let's add the hidden field for our post ID. And we forgot to add our form builder, so let's do that quickly. So f.submit. And let's just rename this to our post ID, and then we can remove these classes as they're not necessary now. So let's add our text field now, and then we can try this out. So now we need to set the value of our comment. So we can do this in the controller. So let's set this as comment.new, and that should work. And we're seeing this error message about merge, undefined method merge, and it looks like we've missed something in this statement. So if we hop back into our view again, and I think we forgot to add value here. So that seems to have fixed that problem, but the styling of our comment form looks a little bit funny right now. However, the value seems to be set for the post ID. So let's figure out how we can style this up a little bit better. And the first thing we can do here is pad this box out a little bit, set a background color, and okay, and then we can set a border as well. So we'll just copy that from our post details class above, and already it's starting to look a little bit nicer, but we would like to really get this comment field to fill the space better. So we'll try adding a class that is part of Bootstrap, and it's still not quite right. But what we can do is we can put a class or a div around this, and we will set it as a multi-form field, so a form group, and let's give this a try. So you can actually take a quick look at Bootstrap's documentation to get the right code to put in here. So I've kind of forgotten how to do this a little bit, so I've just double checked on their documentation, and we can just grab this code and paste it in. So we just need to change these class names around a little bit, and now it's looking really nice. So the only thing I want to do now is remove this kind of glow effect from the text area, or the text field. So let's add a class here so we can grab this via our CSS file. So we will try to remove the glow from this field. Now, normally removing the outline via CSS solves this problem, but in this case we're going to inspect the field to see what's actually happening. So we can force that to be a hover state or a focus state, and if we scroll down here we can see that there is actually a box shadow being set. Now I think that's default from Bootstrap, so we can try and override that by setting that to none. And as a quick solution for now, we can add this important to the end of the CSS, and we can see here now that the outline has disappeared, so it's starting to look a bit cleaner and nicer. Now we're getting this message about post ID unknown attribute. So I guess we need to just double check our schema to see if we've created that. And we can see here it's using the plural form of posts ID, so we've made a mistake in our migration. So we can roll that back quickly. So reg db rollback, and let's modify our migration file. So take off the S at the end of these and run this once again. And this time it should work, and it has gone through. So now we want to display the comment after we create it. So I'm just adding some additional comments here so that we have something to see once we create this view. Now let's go back, and yeah, we can see here from our server logs that it is creating the comments successfully. So let's just close down some of these files so I can see more clearly what's going on here. So going back to our view, then we want to display the comments that have been made. So to do this, we'll create a partial and render that here. So we'll create a comments partial within the posts folder, and let's set this file up. So in here we want to loop over each of the comments for that post. So we can do that using post.comments because we have set the relationship up within the model. So the post has many comments, so this should work automatically. But we can actually pass in the post as a variable in this case, so we could reuse this comments file or partial in different places within our application. So here we want to display our username of the account and also the comment that they have made. So let's make this field in bold for our username. we're getting an error here, so it doesn't seem to be recognizing the post variable we're passing in. I think we forgot to include the word partial, render partial, but we can remove this locals, and this should work without that. Now we're getting a different issue here. This is about the account. So we haven't got a relationship in the model set up between the comment and account. So we can add that and see if this fixes it. And indeed it does. So now we're seeing our username and post, but it also appears to be printing out this array of posts. So let's remove this equals on the loop, and that should fix that. And now we want to style the comments a little bit so that they are there's some kind of line break there or spacing between them, and that's looking a lot better now. And we can compare this to how it looks on Instagram, and it's looking pretty close now in terms of layout. So it's quite happy with that so far. So let's sign in with a different account now and leave some comments on posts and see how it looks with different usernames. So let's add a new comment here and see how it looks. So that's working quite well now. So that's just taken us 10 minutes to set up comments, and I'm quite happy with the layout. So going back to our profile now, what I would like to do is make the edit profile button a little bit more like the Instagram version. So it's just a light border around it and a clear background. And also I'd like to have this hover effect on the images and have this side scroll bar type feature and the comments at the bottom. So these are what we'll try and build out in this video. And we could also have this icon at the top left, something to make it stand out a little bit. But first thing we want to do then is have a look at this profile. So let's go ahead and style up our edit profile button a little further. And we'll try to move it to the right so that it's not underneath the account name. So let's float this to the right. Now it's a little bit wide at the moment, so we can set a max width on this. So the layout is starting to look pretty good right now, but let's update the styles of our button. So we can add a custom class in to style this a little bit differently from the normal Bootstrap buttons. So let's make our background of the button transparent, and then we'll want to add a border around the outside. And then we can also add a border radius to make the corners of the button rounded. And it looks like our styles haven't taken effect, but we can override this temporarily. Now we could actually put a ID on this button, and that would override this without using the important rules, but it's okay for now as a temporary measure just for this demonstration. So our button is starting to look a little bit nicer now. And we can also add some hover effects on this when the user puts their mouse over the button to set a background color. And another thing we can do is the top navigation. We can make that white to match Instagram. So right now we have this dark color on it on the top navigation. So just by changing the class names here, we should be able to get this. So at the moment it's navbar dark, but we can change that within our layout. So now we have the white navigation at the top. And if we compare this to Instagram, we can see that there's a border underneath and there's a little bit more padding on the navigation area. So let's do this, just try to make it very similar to what we see on Instagram. So this is starting to look pretty good right now, but I think we can still increase the padding a little bit here, space this top part out. So that's looking very close right now. Overall, I'm quite happy with this. Now let's add in an icon in the top left of the branding bar, nav bar brand. So we'll add a fun awesome icon here and see if we can make this look a little bit more professional at the top. So we'll add a class for FA Instagram and see if that works. And I think this isn't working because we don't have the branding style sheet included. Now we could add that, but I think we don't necessarily need it right now. But what we can do is have a replacement icon there. So we could use something like the hashtag. And I think in this case the hashtag works fine for this MVP. So remove that line, and I think it looks a little bit better now. So we need to tidy up this top right section a little further. So we want that name to be directly under the username. So let's move this full name up into the same paragraph tag, and we'll add a line break. We can try to float this image to the left, so that should pull the text up to the right of the image. And then we'll just add a margin to the right. So we can add a class for this, but we will need to set the style to add that margin. Normally when I build applications, I will have a set of helper styles that allow me to do margins and padding and on top, left, right, etc. But in this application we haven't added that yet, so I will just add the style for this really quickly. So we're basically just having this class that does the margin to the right, and it's looking pretty good right now. We can tweak it to make it a little bit larger. And one thing I want to point out is that the logo on Instagram, if you click on it, it will go back to the dashboard if the user is signed in. So we want to add similar logic to our application to do that. So we can set the path based on the user's login status. So we can use account signed in to check if they are already signed in. And if so, then we will return a different path. So that will be the dashboard path. Otherwise, we will return the application root path. So if the user is signed out. So in this case, clicking it should be taking us back, but there is something going on. Yeah, so we forgot to add the equal sign here, so that will print this path out. And we test that now, and it is working. So the next thing we want to do now is have this comment button working. So on Instagram, it takes you directly to the show view of the post. So we will do the same thing. We will have it pointing to a different view. So I'm just going to copy the code here from the feed view, and we will set up a new show view. So this will be for the post itself, one single post. So we want to set up this sidebar with the description and comments. So let's clear this up a little bit and take out some of the unnecessary things. So in the sidebar, then we will have this comment box. We'll move this down. So the left column will just be the image itself. So we can take out this section on the post meta, so get rid of the username, and that will come down into the right column. Paste that in at the top. Just clean this up a little bit, and we don't need to iterate over multiple posts, so this will just be a single post. So we can remove that. And we can add a check here to ensure that the image is actually set before we grab that URL for this image tag. So for each of these cases where we have the post, we need to change that to an instance variable, as we are only loading a single post here. Now we could do a find and replace on this, but I think we can do this quite quickly, so we'll just update this manually. So now back in our posts controller, We already have the show method here, but we need to add a way to load the post that we are viewing. So we'll create the set post method and we will load based on the parameter that is passed in from the URL. And we will add a check to see that the parameter exists before we try to load that post. And finally, let's add a before action to load the post on the show view. And finally then on the post feed we can add a link so that when the comment box is clicked they go to that show view. And in this case we can create a link as a block. So let's try this out now and see if it works. And we need to make a minor correction here to use the instance variable in the show view. So we must have missed this on one or two places. So line 16, let's update that. And again on line 20. And this time we're seeing a different error. It is because we have not set the comment on that show view. So let's do comment.new. And now it is working. And on the right, we can see this sidebar with something similar to what they have on Instagram. So we've got the user, the description, and some comments underneath. But we should really add our buttons to the bottom. We currently have them at the top of our sidebar, so let's move that down. And on Instagram they also have this scrolling feature if you have multiple comments. So we'll add that as well, but we can do that by setting up a new div and wrapping that around the comments partial that we are loading. And then within the style sheet then we can set an overflow to force a scroll bar on that div. So if it's more than 300 pixels it will have to have a scroll bar. So let's test this with a smaller value to see if we can force that scroll bar. And here we can see it working for the first time. Now this won't really come into play until we have more comments, but also one thing to note there is that they have this time ago since a comment was made. So if we jump into our comments we can add that. So Rails makes this really easy. They have a function called time ago in words, and you just pass in the created at date on the model, and as you can see now we've got 5 days ago, each of these posts 7 days ago. So now that we have this in place we will go and move our post actions down to the bottom. And we'll need to add some spacing between the buttons and the comments area. So we can add a class onto this section to use within our style sheets. So now we can add a border to this in CSS, and we can also add some padding and margin to give a little bit more space in the design. So 20 pixels padding and a margin top, so that will be above the line to give some spacing. So that's looking a bit better now. So if we compare our page to Instagram, we can see that Instagram, the whole section is scrollable, including the description. So let's try to make ours work in a similar way. So now that whole section is scrollable, and we can change the height on that scroll window. So on Instagram, when you click on the comment icon, it actually selects the add a comment field, and on the heart icon it goes red once we click on it. So this makes some updates here to handle the functionality in the same way. So let's begin with the comment icon. We can add an ID to this so we can select it within JavaScript quite easily. Now we also have this username underneath the likes in the right hand column, but on our design I don't think we need to have that, so we can take that out. And then within CSS we can make this comments area a little bit taller to fit the screen. And now we want to make our comment field or our comment icon select the comment box once it's clicked. So this should only happen in this view, so within the show view. So we can use the post comment ID that we've created, and then we need to have a way to select this comment field. So we can add an ID to this. But normally in Ruby on Rails, when you create a form, there is an ID added by default. So in this case, it's called new comment. And even if we look at the comment field itself, it has a different ID set. So it is comment_comment. So we can use that directly to select this field. And now we want to focus this field. So we'll use a .focus to select it, make it clear for the user that they need to enter the comment. So now let's highlight this like button red once it's active. So we can do that by changing the CSS a little bit. So now this is starting to look good. We have the highlighted red heart icon. And finally we'll just test in our comment here, and you can see that it takes us back to the dashboard. And then if we click on the icon again, it brings us back to this show view, which is working how we want it right now. So now on the profile, we want to have each of these posts link back to the show view, so you can click on the post for more details. So let's add a link to the front of this image. And you can see now that we can click through on each post. So now we will add an additional field to the comment form, and this will only be on the show view of that post. So we want to be able to return the user back to the post rather than taking them back to the dashboard. That way the user can automatically see the comment that they've made. So if we go in here now to our controller for our post controller, and we can set the return URL based on the parameter, this return to parameter that we've created. So that's a hidden field on the form, and if that value is set, then we will return back to the post itself. We have made a little bit of a mistake here. We should be putting that code into the comments controller and not the post controller. So let's just update this quickly. So we've just pasted it in, and now we can test this out. Now it appears to be still taking us back to the dashboard, and that is because we have not set the return URL as a whitelisted field. You can see here on our server log that it's unpermitted parameter. Now what we can do for this is we can actually set it within the model. We can use an attribute accessor. So this will basically allow us to pass a value for this return to field, but it will not store it in the database. So we don't have a value for that in the database, so we don't want Rails to try and save that to our database. So let's try this again. And this time we can see that the return to is actually within the comment parameter. So we need to wrap it in that comment parameter. And this time Rails is complaining that the post has not been set. So we can just change this to comment.post ID, and that should work. And let's try this once again. And this time it's finally working for us. So we got there eventually. Let's try this out on some new posts. And it's looking pretty good right now. The next thing we can do is we can have this hover effect on the images on our feed, and we'll have a comment count and a like count on there. So let's go and set this up now for comments. So we can copy this code here from our like model and use that as a way of increasing and decreasing the comment count. let's change these values to total comments count for both of these methods. And now if we go back to our profile, we can add some additional information to each post within this loop. So we want to show both the number of comments and the number of likes. So in here we want to add an icon for each of these, and we can do that using Font Awesome again. But first I'm just dropping in the total likes and total comments. So we've wrapped these numbers in a div with a class of post stats, and what we want to do here is give it a maximum width and height so that it fills the entire image, and then we also want to set a semi-transparent background. Now we can do that using RGBA, A being the alpha. So we set that to 0.5 and that will be about 50% transparency. And then we will change the color of the text to white, and we need to center align that text vertically as well as horizontally. So it needs to be halfway up the image, and to do that we will create an additional div that will sit inside our post stats div, and we will call this .inner, and we'll use a margin on this to try and push it down the image. Now we could do something with flexbox here, but let's just try to do this really quickly, keep it very simple. Another thing to note here is that the images are square on the Instagram profile feed, and that makes it easier for us to do the overlay. So we will also make our post square, and we can do that by adding a new class here, and then we will set additional styles in our style sheet. So to do this quickly, we can set a height for our image, and we can set the overflow to hidden, so that will just be cut off at the 290 pixel mark in this case. And we can also set the width to be the same size. And what we can actually do to give us a little bit more control over the image is set a style and embed the image as a background on this div. And I think this is how it is done on Instagram. When you inspect the element, it is actually a background image that is attached via CSS. So we'll just add some additional styles here to prevent the image from tiling, and we just want to center align the image. So within the CSS we can force our image to fit the size of the div, and we can do that using cover, background size cover, and then we can see the image right in the center. So one thing to note here is that on Instagram they are using icons, so we are currently just using text on the overlay on our images. So let's replace that now. So we can delete the likes and comments text, and then we will use Font Awesome to add icons. So now we can copy this and add our comment. So we need to add a little bit of spacing in, and we also notice that our comments number has not been set. So by default this does not set a 0 on the database entry, so that's something we can update via a migration. However, we also need to add some spacing between these likes and comments, so let's do that now. So that's looking much tidier now. So now we can hide these stats by default, and once the user hovers over them, hovers over the image, we want to show the stats. So in order to do that, we need to move the hover out onto the image itself. So when the user hovers this instaPost class, which is our image, then we want to show the post stats. We want that to appear. So that appears to be working correctly. However, the images are very dark here, so it's hard to see exactly what's happening. So I'm going to upload an additional image, one of the ones I copied from my own Instagram, just to see how it looks, since it's a much brighter image and we can get a feel for the overlay and how that's working now. So this image is definitely a lot brighter. Let's go in and experiment here a little bit. Just like this post, leave a comment. And that's looking pretty good right now. And we see a little bit of an issue here with the overlay on our hover. If we change this inner margin to padding, it should fix this issue. And we can see that now everything's aligned quite well. So one thing we need to do now is make these images clickable. Now once we added the hover effect, we moved the image as a background image in the style. So once we did that, we removed the link at the same time. So we can go ahead and update that now by using the link as a block and just wrap it around the code that we have already in place. So let's do that now. We'll move the link to the top outside of the post stats, and then we'll close that link off and give this a try. And now it appears to be working again. So now we have that working, we can add a profile image beside each of these comments. So on the left of the username, we can add the profile image. And as a shortcut for that, we can just copy and paste the profile image that we used before. And we can just modify the values here to fit based on the comment loop that we are in. So comment.account.username. And then if the comment.account.image is present, then we will show the profile image. So that's working. We may want to change the size here a little bit to make them smaller. And what we can actually do is use the helper method that we created in the last video. So it's a profile picture helper method, and that allows us to pass in a size dimension. So let's replace this quickly and see if that works for us. So take these classes out, and we can remove this conditional as it's already in the helper, and we need to pass in the size then to make these more suitable. So we can experiment with this a little bit to get the size we're happy with. And if we compare it with Instagram, the text should be aligned. So the timestamp should be directly underneath the comment. So we can fiddle around with the styling here to try and get this lined up a little bit better, but I'm not going to waste too much time on this. So this is just small CSS tweaks. You could even modify the HTML to use column layout to display this, but the point I want to make here just is that we've got to the point now where we've got the image, the username, the comment, and it's looking pretty good all around. So I'm happy with this as it is. So one thing we need to do here is just link the username back to that profile of that user. So that way we can click on a user's name and see their profile. And of course we want to just darken the text here. So one more thing I want to show here, and that is about the performance issue I mentioned in a previous video, and that is the n+1 query issue. So what we can do to fix that is we can use the includes method. So that will be used for other fields that are connected to that model. So in the case of post, we want to include our comments and our accounts. So we'll be using those values in our views. So for our post view, we can set the comments directly within the show method in our controller. And from that, then we can include the accounts. So that way we won't be making a query every time we loop over the comment section. So we'll just pass in the post ID in this case. So in our comments partial, we can just use the comments instance, which is an array of comments that we've loaded for that post. And if you look at the logs here, you can see the difference this makes. There's only minimal queries being loaded compared to what there was before. If we scroll up, you can see all the cached queries that we had before. So this is the solution to the n+1 query problem that can be seen in Rails. Now it's normally a human error. We can easily make these mistakes, but with a little bit of effort we can improve the efficiency of our code. And since we are using a partial here for comments, we will just update it to pass in the comments directly, since we'll be using this in different places on our app. I just want to take the time to remind you while I tidy up this code here that if you do enjoy this content, do subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in the future. And I was originally intending to finish this video at this point, but I decided to add some more tidy ups and improvements just to finish this off and really leave it looking like a nice product when we finish this video. So I have made some updates to the profile. So I have added some new photos here just to make it look a little bit brighter and cleaner and easier on the eye. And these are looking quite nice. And I've also added some profile pictures for some of the users. So I've logged in, updated their profile picture, also updated their username and left some comments and uploaded some photos for some of these users. So if we go back to the dashboard now, we can see that each of the users has been updated. And I've added this number of users here. And so that happens if the user is older than the date that we have set, which I think is 2 days. So I'll have this count of users. One thing to note here is that all the posts on this feed are currently my own. However, I will show what I have added here in terms of the code. So I've added this code to allow only to show my followers' posts and then additionally my own posts on the line underneath. So we're using the following ID and then I'm inserting my own ID here. So I disable that, we have no posts. So currently I'm not following any users, but if I pick a user here, for example Jane, and follow her, we will see that her posts are now embedded in my feed. So that's kind of how it works on Instagram, and that's the way we have it set up now, and it's working quite well. And we can go ahead and like or comment on these posts. And I think it really helps with these nice colorful images to make the app look much nicer. So again, we'll follow another user and then we can see their posts in our feed again too. And if we sign out now, you will also see that I've added some background color here to the landing page on the home page. And one thing we want to do here is, based on a comment I got in the previous video, we want to add a social login to this platform. So for that we're using OmniAuth, which is part of Devise. So we're using Devise for the sign up, sign in method already. So we'll use the additional gem called OmniAuth Facebook, and that will allow us to connect with a Facebook app and create an account based on that user's social details. So let's give this a try. We're just going through the instructions here now, and we need to add a new field into our accounts table in our database. So first we'll bundle install to get the new gem, then we'll run a migration to add these additional fields. So in our migration we can see that there are 2 new fields being added. Let's go ahead and run the migrate method. And now within our Devise initializer, we need to copy this line and paste it in. So we go under config initializers, Devise, and we can add this into the file. So I'm just searching for the OmniAuth section, and we need to replace this with environment variables. So we can set those in our application.yml. And it's saying here you can add this additional token params if required, but for now we're going to try without this. And we will just append the FB underscore to our environment variables. And there's another thing we have to do here within the model itself. So our account model will need to add this OmniAuthable code and allow it to use Facebook. Let's paste this onto the end of our Devise statement, And we'll need to restart the server here to get this running. And we can see here that there's new routes created for logging in and callback. So we'll add this sign in with Facebook link to our homepage. Let's add this underneath. So now we've got this sign in link here, and we need to set an application ID for this to work. So if we visit developers.facebook.com, we can go ahead and set a new application up quite quickly. So this is create a dummy application. And now if we go under settings, we can go under basic here and grab the details we need for the app ID and app secret. So you can go ahead and paste these details into your application.yml file that we set up earlier. And now we will restart the server so that this can take effect. And now we are brought to this confirmation screen to allow this app to use our details. So we can see an error here, so it looks like we've missed something in the instructions. And we have to include this controller's OmniAuth callbacks. So we need to add this into our routes file. Just change this to accounts. So we'll need to create this new folder within our controllers to hold this accounts OmniAuthable controller. And again, let's just change this to accounts. And we can paste in this code for Facebook then underneath. And we'll just modify this to suit our model. So now we need to add some code to our model, to our account model, and it's this self.from OmniAuth method. So what this does is basically grab the details from the response from Facebook and uses it to populate a new account for our model. So we'll create a new account based on the email, password, name, image from Facebook. So let's give this a try. And we can modify this just to use the first name. And yeah, everything looks pretty good here right now. So let's go back to our app and try let's log in again. And we're getting a message here now about not having set up the username. So on our regular sign up form, we have the username which the user has to enter. But when we're pulling this data from Facebook, we are not populating that automatically. So we can add that to this from OmniAuth method. We can set the username based on the name on the account. So info.name. So even just looking at our server logs here, we can see that the account is already being inserted. So the account is being created, it's just not populating the username. So we're going to add some basic styling to this Facebook button. So we'll just give it the button class and a button info class to make it blue. So it looks a little bit nicer. And we can see when we click on it again, it has automatically signed us in. And this time if we click on profile, we can see that there is a %20 here, which represents a space between the name. So we've just used the full name in this. We've just used the full name to create this username. So what we can do here is use a gsub to remove that blank space. And to do this now, we will need to go and delete the account from our console. So we'll quickly just destroy the last account and try this once more. And this time now we can see that there is no space in the name. So we've got a full username, and we'll upload a new post. So automatically it's created us this new account without us typing in anything, which is quite nice. So we'll just put in our first post. We can go ahead and like our own post here. And we can follow some users to see new posts in our feed. And we can leave new comments. And we can see even our new post on our profile. So that's going to be it for this video. If you found this video helpful, do subscribe to the channel, as I will be creating more content like this in the future. And don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. And I really appreciate it if you've made it the whole way to the end, because I know that this is quite a long amount of time for any video. But I hope you guys have an awesome day ahead, and I will see you in the next video.